of Dragon completing its sixth official long duration mission for NASA's Commercial Crew program. For those of you following along, you'll know that the Crew 7 crew arrived just last week, and they will be taking over for Crew 6, who is now headed home. My name is Kate Tice, Senior Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX. Joining me today from NASA Communications is Gary Jordan.
Hey,
Welcome.
hey, Kate, great to be here. Thanks. Once Dragon departs the station, the crew's flight home is expected to last around 17 hours. Shortly after separation, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of carefully choreographed maneuvers, up to 5 departure burns, to increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Dragon will also execute a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location.
Next on its trip home is deorbit, entry and landing, which covers all operations after the final departure maneuver. That includes trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and finally, splashdown, all off the Florida coast, at which point our teams will recover Steve, Woody, Sultan, and Andre. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida at 12:26 a.m. Eastern Time, 9:26 p.m. Pacific Time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels.
Today on board the space station is Expedition 69 crew, led by Russ Cosmos cosmonaut and space station commander Sergei Prokopyev. Of course, just like its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board. NASA astronaut Frank Rubio helped the crew members prepare for departure today and will be watching from the cupola, but the prime departure monitoring role falls on Steve Bowen and Woody Hoberg from inside the Dragon. Mission controls in Houston and Hawthorne will back them up. Let's go over to Leah Cheshire at the NASA Johnson Space Center to talk a little bit about how the space station crew has been preparing to send the crew home and what we can expect from here until Dragon departs from the station. Leah.
Thanks, Gary, and welcome to the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. The flight control team is primed and ready for this morning's undocking operations. Today's Orbit 1 team is being led by NASA Flight Director Pooja Jasrani, and the Capcom, the person speaking with the astronauts on the International Space Station, is David Brenna. Since Crew 7's arrival just last week, it's been a busy week during our direct handover. Over the last several days, the astronauts worked to pack Dragon full of cargo for the return journey. Along with the crew, Dragon will return cargo back to Earth, which includes some samples for continuing human research and some hardware and other items. Earlier today, Jasmine Mobelli and Andy Mogensen worked to move cold bags and polar freezers, which store cold research samples and scientific experiments, in Dragon Endeavour. All of this cargo is offloaded after we get the crew out following splashdown, and those scientific samples will be sent to researchers for final analysis, some of those samples being received by those researchers even within just a few hours after splashdown. The crew also took time to get their SpaceX suits unpacked and ready for their journey home. And since getting the hatches closed this morning, that Dragon hatch closer coming at 4:19 a.m. Central Time, the astronauts are now suited up and in their seats. They are standing by for undocking. We have the final go, no-go poll coming up in a few minutes, where the SpaceX and NASA teams make their final call for Dragon to depart station. This is one of the many checkpoints in the return that continue all the way up until just before the deorbit burn and have happened over the last several days, giving mission managers multiple chances to assess the weather at the splashdown zones and making sure everything lines up for Dragon's departure. So we're standing by for the final go, no-go, but right now everything continues to look good for an on-time departure. And with that, I will send it back to Kate and Gary in Hawthorne.
Separation is
Dragon
set for
SpaceX on the big loop. Final reconfigurations for undock are complete and nominal. NASA and SpaceX teams have both pulled go for the undock sequence start at 1100 UTC. Please confirm that your visors are down and crew are ready for undock and departure.
SpaceX Endeavour, visors are down, crew is ready to undock.
All right, so as we just heard moments ago, we got confirmation that Dragon completed its final configuration and that mission operators are go for the undocking procedure, so that's great.
So just like its approach to the International Space Station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, requiring no action from the crew on board, which is typically faster and easier this time around since the crew won't have the option to stop at waypoints like we see at when the vehicle arrives.
Once the undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will use its Draco engines to thrust away from the station in a series of 5 departure burns, which are carefully choreographed maneuvers that will increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. From there, a phasing burn will place Dragon on a trajectory back to Earth.
Wrapping up its trip home, Dragon will go through deorbit, entry, and landing, which covers all operations after that final departure maneuver. That includes trunk separation, a deorbit burn, closure of the nose cone, deployment of the drogue and main parachutes, and finally, splashdown off the Florida coast, at which point our teams will recover the Crew6 astronauts inside Dragon from the water.
So as we just heard moments ago, that mission operators have pulled go for undocking. So as you will hear throughout the webcast, both as we approach the station and depart, everything is very carefully choreographed. There's a series of checks to make sure that we are go to proceed to the next step. And in this case, that next step is undocking.
That's right. And that will actually initiate the go for undock right at 4 a.m. Pacific time. And we're waiting for that undocking sequence to begin. So once that happens, it'll take less than 5 minutes or so for the Dragon to physically separate from the International Space Station, which has been its home for 6 months.
The first step in the automatic undocking sequence is for the umbilicals to retract. These umbilicals connect Dragon systems to the space station. They transfer power, telemetry, and commands between the 2 vehicles throughout Dragon's stay. Once that's complete, Dragon will unlatch itself from the space station by releasing the 12 hard capture hooks and that will occur in 2 separate phases. All of that combined will take roughly 4.5 minutes. Then Dragon will be ready to depart from station and begin to move itself further and further away by using its thrusters.
That's right. Dragon's initial departure from the station is a little different from other docked vehicles like the Soyuz that rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon executes 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco engines surrounding the base of the capsule, with the first breaking any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and the second slowly backing the spacecraft away. And we're expecting the call for the undocking sequence to begin in the next few minutes or so. All right, so before they depart the station, let's take a moment to get to know the crew that we're bringing home today. First is Captain Steve Bowen, who hails from Cohasset, Massachusetts, and is married with 3 children. He holds the title of the first U.S. Navy submarine officer to be selected as a mission specialist by NASA. Bowen is also a veteran of 3 previous NASA space flights, including space shuttle flights on STS-126, 132, and 133. During those missions, he and his crew expanded the living quarters of the International Space Station, delivered an integrated cargo carrier, and the Russian mini research module. With this mission, he will have logged an estimated 227 days in space over 4 flights, including 65 hours and 57 minutes in 10 spacewalks. Today, he's the commander of Crew6.
Sitting next to Stephen is pilot Warren Woody Hoberg. The 37-year-old is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He studied aeronautics and astronautics from MIT before getting a doctorate in electrical engineering and computer science from University of California, Berkeley. During grad school, Hoberg worked as an EMT with the Yosemite Search and Rescue. Crew6 has been Hoberg's first flight since NASA selected him to be an astronaut in 2017. He is also a commercial pilot with instrument, single engine, and multi-engine ratings. As pilot for Crew6, he is responsible for spacecraft systems and performance. Aboard the station, he served as an Expedition 68 and 69 flight engineer and is coming home with 186 days in space and 11 hours, 38 minutes of time outside the hatch on 2 spacewalks.
In the role of mission specialist is astronaut Sultan al-Nayadi. He was chosen by the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center of the United Arab Emirates to be a part of Expedition 68 and 69. The father of 5 spent most of his life in Al Ain and Abu Dhabi, but in 2020 traded that in for astronaut training in Houston at the NASA Johnson Space Center. For this has been his first trip to space, so he now also has 186 days in orbit. Additionally, he went on one spacewalk, totaling 7 hours and 1 minute.
It was also the first trip to space for the second mission specialist, Russ Cosmos cosmonaut Andre Fedjiev. Andre was selected as a cosmonaut back in 2012. He will monitor the spacecraft during the dynamic re-entry phase of flight. While on board station, he served as a flight engineer for Expedition 68 and 69 and will return to Earth with 186 days of time and space under his belt.
That's right, and they'll all be undocking here in just a few minutes. Before they actually undocked, they actually had played a game with the flight operations team on the ground, and just moments before we started this broadcast, they exchanged some words. Here's a replay of that moment.
Dragon, Houston, on the big loop.
Houston Dragon, go ahead.
Hey, we're still about 45 minutes from undock, but before we get busy, we just want to say, wow, can you believe it's already time to leave? We can't. It's been an amazing mission. You've birthed 2 Cygnuses, or Cygni, docked 2 cargo Dragons, you've executed a port relocate, facilitated a private astronaut mission, performed 3 U.S. EVAs and 5 Russian EVAs, copious amounts of critical science, as well as your fair share of maintenance, stowage, and rack swaps. And we didn't really want to mention it, but you also mastered us in chess a few times, too. So you're truly space kings. You've done an incredible job, and to say it's been a pleasure to support you guys during this mission would be an understatement. Let's send you guys home.
Houston Endeavor, thank you very much. It's been a real privilege and an honor to be up here for this expedition as it continues. And we're coming up on 23 years of continuous occupation of the International Space Station, which is absolutely amazing. It's just a real privilege to be a part of it. It has been an amazing mission. The Expedition 69 crew has been above and beyond, and I've had the privilege of watching it all happen. I really think this has been amazing. And thank you, Houston, and thank you, Mission Control, and everybody on the ground, the entire team from Scuba, Huntsville, Munich, Moscow, the entire team coming together and ensuring that our expedition was smooth and safely completed. It's really been an honor. Thank you.
So for those of you just tuning in, we are standing by for the command of the undocking sequence. Again, this is an autonomous sequence that Dragon performs once commanded to do so.
Undock sequence commanded.
And right on time. There's that call we were standing by for to basically command Dragon to begin the undocking sequence. With Dragon now getting ready to undock, let's head over to Leah.